Welcome to a space where clarity replaces confusion and understanding transforms the way you see connection. This is your journey into emotional awareness with Avoidant Decoded. If you're ready to finally break free from patterns that once controlled your peace and see relationships for what they truly are, you're exactly where you need to be. Have you ever met someone who makes you feel deeply seen, yet strangely unsure at the same time? Someone who looks at you like you matter, but can disappear as if you don't. Stay with me, because once you truly understand what's happening beneath this experience, the way you see it will completely change. You won't just feel a sense of relief, you'll finally understand what's been going on inside both of you. This kind of situation isn't simple confusion. There's something much deeper behind it, and it often starts very quietly. In the beginning, everything feels easy and natural. There's a smooth rhythm between you that doesn't feel forced. Conversations flow without effort. Emotions feel strong. There's a pull toward them that you can't really explain. You feel noticed, understood, maybe even in a way you've never experienced before. For a moment, it feels like this could turn into something real and meaningful. Then, without any clear reason, things begin to shift. Not in a dramatic way, but enough for you to feel it. Their responses slow down. Their energy changes. The warmth you once felt slowly becomes distance you can't quite make sense of. And suddenly, you're left trying to figure out what went wrong. You start replaying everything in your mind, every message, every word, every small detail. You search for an answer, but nothing definite ever shows up. And that's the hardest part. Nothing actually ended in a clear way. There was no direct rejection, no honest closure, just silence growing between you. And that's where your mind gets stuck. When something ends clearly, you can process it, you can accept it, feel it, and eventually let it go. But when it stays undefined, your mind keeps trying to solve it. You begin asking questions that slowly take away your peace. Did they ever really care? Was any of it genuine? Why does it feel so intense for me, but not for them? Without realizing it, your sense of worth starts depending on how they behave. When they come closer, you feel valued. When they pull away, you feel rejected. This emotional roller coaster doesn't happen by accident. There's a psychological pattern behind it. You're not overreacting. The human brain is wired this way. Uncertainty creates attachment. When someone gives you attention and then pulls it back, your system starts craving that attention again. At some point, it's not even about the person anymore. It becomes about chasing the feeling they once gave you. And the more inconsistent they are, the stronger that pull becomes. That's why letting go feels so hard. Not because they are perfect, but because the pattern itself keeps you hooked. But there's another side to this that many people don't fully understand. The avoidant person doesn't experience closeness the same way you do. It's not that they don't feel anything. In many cases, they actually feel too much, too quickly, and don't know how to handle it. When the connection starts to deepen, something inside them reacts, almost like an internal alarm going off, a fear of losing control, a fear of becoming dependent, a fear of being emotionally exposed. So they create distance to protect themselves, not because you're not enough, but because closeness itself feels overwhelming to them. This is where the real conflict begins. For you, love feels like moving closer. For them, love can feel like needing space. While you try to close the gap, they instinctively increase it. And that creates a cycle that feels impossible to break. You reach out more, they pull away further. You invest more emotionally, they retreat even more. Over time, without even noticing, you start losing yourself in the process. Your focus shifts entirely onto them. You wait for their messages. You analyze their tone. You hold on to small moments of warmth as if they define everything. And deep down, you feel something isn't right, but you keep holding on because what you felt in the beginning was real. And that's the trap. You're not chasing who they are now. You're chasing who they were in the beginning, the version of them that made you feel chosen, seen, and alive. Your mind keeps telling you that if it felt that real once, it must be possible again. But this is what most people struggle to accept. Not every strong connection is meant to bring peace. Some connections exist to show you something about yourself. They reveal your emotional patterns, your attachment wounds, and how much you're willing to tolerate in the name of love. They're not always stable, but they are revealing. And once you start seeing that clearly, something inside you begins to shift. You stop blaming yourself for their distance. You stop looking for clarity from someone who can't give it. You stop minimizing your needs just to stay close to them. But even then, you might still feel stuck in the cycle. still wondering why something that feels so meaningful also feels so unstable. The truth is, there isn't one simple explanation. This isn't just about feelings, it's about psychological wiring, past conditioning, and two completely different attachment styles colliding. If you don't understand it, the pattern keeps repeating. But once you do understand it, you don't just see them differently, you start seeing yourself differently too. And that's where real change begins. So why is it that even when you decide to move on, something still pulls you back? You try to create distance. You focus on yourself. You tell yourself it's over. And just when you start feeling stable again, they come back. One message, one reaction, one small signal, and suddenly everything you rebuilt inside starts to shake. It feels like you're caught in a loop you never chose, like something keeps pulling you back into the same emotional space again and again, and that's what makes it so confusing. It stops feeling like a choice and starts feeling like a force. You don't wake up one day deciding to stay attached. It happens slowly. First, it feels like curiosity, then it becomes reflection, then it turns into a habit. And before you even realize it, they're no longer just someone from your past. They've become a constant presence in your mind. They don't just fade away from your life. Instead, they become a repeated presence in your inner world. But what's really happening here isn't as mysterious as it feels. When someone comes into your life and leaves a strong emotional mark without giving you real closure, your mind doesn't register it as finished. It treats it like something incomplete, and the mind is naturally wired to seek completion. So it keeps going back to it, replaying moments, revisiting conversations, trying to make sense of something that never fully explained itself. It's like a sentence that was never finished. Even if everything else in your life keeps moving forward, that unfinished part stays active in the background, not loudly but consistently enough that it shows up in quiet moments. You notice it when you're alone, when your mind isn't busy, when there's nothing else pulling your attention. That's why it's so hard to forget. Even if they're physically gone, the attachment is still active in your thoughts, because your mind doesn't separate gone from resolved. It only understands whether something feels complete or not. Now adding consistency to that. One moment they're present, the next they're distant. Warmth comes, then disappears. They show up, then go silent. This kind of pattern creates a strong reaction inside you because your brain starts associating them with emotional reward, but in an unpredictable way. And unpredictability doesn't create calm, it creates craving. There's a quiet pull that keeps you mentally connected, waiting for the next moment of attention, even when you know you don't want to feel this way anymore. So it's not just that you're remembering them, you're also expecting them. You start noticing patterns, you analyze timing, you read into gaps in communication as if they must mean something. Slowly, your emotional system adjusts to that inconsistency. Stable attention starts to feel rare, so your mind begins to place more value on even the smallest moments of connection. A simple message feels significant because it breaks the silence. That's why walking away doesn't feel clean. Something inside resists it, not because the connection is truly right, but because your nervous system has learned to link relief with their return. But this dynamic isn't completely one-sided. The other person is also part of it, even if they don't show it in the same way. Even if they seem unaffected, something still exists between you. It just shows up differently for them. When you start pulling back, when your energy shifts and you're no longer chasing, they feel that change. Not always as a clear thought, but as an emotional shift. The pattern they were used to is no longer stable. The distance they once controlled isn't as certain anymore, and that creates discomfort for them too. So they come back, but not always with clarity or intention, just enough to reconnect the thread. Sometimes it's a message without depth. Sometimes it's a casual check-in that doesn't lead anywhere. Sometimes they return after silence as if nothing happened, but something has changed. The connection gets reactivated just enough to pull you back in, and once that happens, the cycle starts again. You open up, hope comes back. You begin to think maybe this time will be different, maybe the distance was temporary, maybe now things will make sense. Your mind starts focusing on potential instead of pattern. But eventually, the same thing happens again. Distance, silence, confusion, repetition. And this is where self-doubt starts to grow. You begin questioning yourself. Maybe you feel too much. Maybe you expect too much. Maybe you're the problem. You replay your actions, your words, your timing, trying to find what you could have done differently. But the truth is much simpler. You're emotionally invested in something that lacks consistency. And without consistency, there's no emotional safety. Without safety, your mind stays alert. It keeps scanning, analyzing, waiting, overthinking. Even in quiet moments, you can't fully relax because nothing feels stable enough to rest into. You might be physically present in your daily life, but mentally a part of you is always somewhere else, watching, waiting, trying to understand signals that keep changing. Over time, this becomes exhausting, not because of what's happening on the outside, but because of the constant processing happening inside you. Your system never fully settles, even calm starts to feel temporary. And slowly, without realizing it, instability starts to feel normal. You begin lowering your standards around consistency. You start confusing intensity with depth, even when it's actually imbalance. Because intensity feels familiar, while stability feels unfamiliar. And still, the connection doesn't fully disappear. It lingers in random thoughts, sudden memories, emotions that come back without warning. A song reminds you. A place reminds you. A quiet moment brings it all back. That lingering feeling creates the illusion that something is still unfinished, that there's still more to come. And that belief keeps a small sense of hope alive. Hope that one day it will align, that clarity will finally arrive, that the version of the connection you once felt will somehow become permanent. But while that hope is there, something else is also happening inside you. Awareness begins to grow. You start noticing patterns instead of just reacting to emotions. You see repetition instead of randomness. You recognize how the same cycle keeps playing out, even if it looks slightly different each time. And once you see it clearly, it becomes hard to ignore. Because now you understand it's not just about feelings, it's about how this dynamic has been shaping your behavior, your focus, and even how you see yourself. That realization changes everything. Your attention starts turning inward. You stop only analyzing them, and you begin observing yourself. At first, it's uncomfortable. You start noticing how much you were adjusting, giving more than you received, minimizing your needs just to keep the connection alive. You see the moments where you stayed silent instead of speaking honestly. The times you ignored your own discomfort just to avoid losing them. The times you accepted confusion because it still felt better than complete absence. And that's not easy to admit. A deeper truth starts to surface. You weren't just part of the connection, you were carrying most of it. You were holding its weight, filling in the gaps, maintaining something that had already become unbalanced. You were the one creating momentum, trying to make sense of silence, trying to keep the connection alive emotionally. That realization doesn't feel light, it feels heavy, because it breaks the illusion that things were equal. It breaks the belief that if you just tried harder or understood them better, things would eventually become stable. But in that heaviness, something begins to shift. You pause before reacting. You stop explaining yourself so quickly. You start pulling your energy back, little by little. You don't stop chasing reassurance out of frustration or because you're shutting down. It happens because something inside you becomes clear. It's a quiet shift in how you see things, one that interrupts the old automatic cycle. Once you truly recognize the pattern, you can't go back to not seeing it. And once that awareness is there, you can't keep participating in the same way without noticing it. You begin to understand something that wasn't obvious before. Every time you gave more of yourself, it didn't create security or closeness. It actually made the imbalance bigger, and slowly, your reactions begin to change. You start pulling your energy back. It's not easy, because part of you is still emotionally invested. There's still a small hope that things could go back to how they once felt. But alongside that hope, something stronger begins to grow, a quiet awareness that starts guiding your choices. You begin choosing peace instead of emotional highs and lows. You choose clarity instead of confusion. You choose yourself instead of staying stuck in a cycle. And that's when things start to feel unfamiliar, because you're no longer acting out of habit. You're not reacting automatically anymore. You're moving from a place of self-respect and awareness, not from a need to hold on to someone or secure their presence, but from a desire to protect your own emotional balance. That shift alone changes everything. Not because you're trying to control anything, but because your energy is no longer as available as it once was. The emotional access they were used to starts to fade. The constant availability they relied on begins to change. And naturally, that creates a reaction. It might not happen right away, and it might not be obvious at first, but it happens. When someone is used to having a certain level of access to you, and that starts to disappear, they feel it. Even if they don't fully understand what's changed, something feels different. Your absence begins to register in a way it didn't before. The comfort they once took for granted is no longer guaranteed, and that creates a sense of discomfort. The control they once had over the connection isn't the same anymore. You're not always there, not constantly reaching out, not trying to prove your value through effort. And this version of you feels unfamiliar to them. The version of you that was always emotionally open, always responsive, always available, that version isn't showing up in the same way anymore. That change creates space for reflection, space for awareness, space they may have avoided before. But this is also where many people lose their progress. The moment they notice even the slightest shift, they go back. They reopen themselves too quickly. They fall into the same patterns of availability, and without realizing it, the cycle resets. But if you stay grounded in what you've learned, something deeper starts to happen. You begin to feel stable within yourself. You're no longer relying on someone else's behavior to regulate your emotions. Their attention doesn't control how you feel anymore. Their absence doesn't shake you the way it used to. From that place of stability, your perspective changes. You stop being impressed by inconsistent attention. You stop treating mixed signals like they mean something meaningful. You stop confusing intensity with safety. This is what real growth looks like. It's not loud or dramatic. It happens internally. And once that growth becomes part of you, you don't go back to who you were before. Even if they come back, even if they reach out, even if they try to reconnect, you're not responding from the same place anymore. There's less urgency, less emotional dependence, and more awareness, more clarity, more self-control. That clarity becomes your strength. Not power over them, but power over yourself, over how you respond, what you allow, and what you choose. At that point, everything begins to feel different. The outcome no longer controls your emotions. You're not waiting for things to resolve. You're not stuck in expectations. You're grounded in understanding. And from there, things become simpler. There's less overthinking, less guessing, less trying to decode behavior that doesn't make sense. Reality becomes clearer. And eventually, one of two things happens. Either they meet you at this new level, or they slowly fade out of your life. Not because you forced anything, but because the old dynamic no longer works. If there's something real underneath the inconsistency, your change forces them to reflect. They can't rely on your availability the way they used to. They have to make a decision, either show up differently or step away. Sometimes that pressure creates awareness. They begin to notice what they overlooked. They start to reflect on their own patterns, and their behavior may begin to shift. Not instantly, not perfectly, but in a way that feels more intentional and consistent, because now the dynamic has changed. You're no longer guaranteed, but even if they come back with effort, something in you has already changed too. You don't fall into the same patterns. You don't ignore what you now clearly see. You don't accept effort that doesn't match your awareness. You move differently. And if a connection continues, it's built on something new: clarity, mutual effort, and emotional stability, not confusion or chasing. And if that shift never happens, if they remain the same and the inconsistency continues, something equally powerful happens on your side. You let go, not out of anger, not because you're overwhelmed, but because you finally see things for what they are. You understand that connection alone isn't enough, that potential without action doesn't create anything real, that waiting for someone to become something they consistently are not only holds you back from your own life, and that realization frees you. You stop holding on to what could be, you accept what is, and that changes everything. There's no more chasing, no more waiting, no more confusing emotional dependence with hope. You move forward with clarity, stability, and self-respect. And maybe the most important realization in all of this is simple. No matter what happens, you're no longer losing yourself. If they grow, you meet them from a place of strength. If they don't, you walk away with that same strength. What once felt like confusion was actually part of your growth. It was never just about them. It was about you learning not to accept uncertainty as love. And once you truly understand that, everything changes. You stop chasing intensity and start looking for alignment. You stop chasing attention and start valuing consistency. You stop abandoning yourself just to hold on to a connection. You choose yourself first, no matter who stays or leaves. And at that point, if something is truly right for you, it won't depend on confusion to survive. In the end, this whole experience isn't just about them. It's about you. It shows you how easily emotional intensity can feel meaningful, how inconsistency can keep you attached, and how unfinished emotions can quietly take control of your thoughts. But more than anything, it shows you this: the moment you start choosing yourself, everything loses its power over you. You stop living in confusion. You stop waiting for clarity from someone who can't give it. You stop measuring your worth based on whether someone stays or goes. Instead, you build something stronger, real emotional stability within yourself. Because real growth doesn't come from finally getting the outcome you wanted. It comes from reaching a point where you no longer need that outcome to feel whole. So whether they stay or leave, whether they change or stay the same, the ending isn't defined by them anymore. It's defined by you. And that's the real conclusion of this journey. You don't lose people. You outgrow the version of yourself that believed you had to be chosen. What once felt confusing begins to reveal its truth. You were never chasing a person, but a pattern that kept you emotionally unsettled. And the moment you choose clarity over confusion and self-respect over temporary connection, the cycle loses its power over you. What remains is a stronger, more grounded version of yourself, no longer defined by someone else's inconsistency. Because real peace was never in their return, it was always in your awareness.